The Holy One, blessed be He. Welcome to Beit Israel International's Voice of Torah podcast. I'm Gadi Ephraim, and today we embark on an exploration of Parashat Tetzaveh, a Torah portion filled with deep spiritual insights, divine service, and the light of Hashem, with host agents Abraham and Sarah. One of the most intriguing aspects of this Parsha is the way Moshe Rabbeinu's name is omitted. Instead of mentioning him explicitly, the Torah begins with VeAtah Tetzaveh, and you shall command. The sages explain that this unique phrasing teaches a profound lesson. True leadership is not about personal recognition, but about being a vessel for divine wisdom. But this phrase, VeAtah Tetzaveh, carries an even deeper secret. The commentators reveal that it alludes to the coming of Mashiach, who will be the ultimate leader of divine light and truth. Just as Moshe led the people in the wilderness and kindled their spiritual flame, Mashiach will ignite the final redemption, bringing the world to a state of ultimate illumination. We prepare for this by bringing Hashem's presence into the world through Torah, learning, mitzvot, and acts of kindness. Each of us has the ability to be a source of divine light, just as the menorah in the Mishkan was kept burning perpetually. The key message of Parashat Tetzaveh is that we are all part of this divine mission. The light of the menorah, the garments of the Kohanim, and the constant presence of Hashem in the Mishkan remind us that our lives must be dedicated to illuminating the world with holiness, wisdom, and kindness. As we delve deeper into this Torah portion, let us take this lesson to heart. We each have the ability to be a light in the world, to be vessels of divine wisdom, and to prepare ourselves for the ultimate redemption. Thank you for joining me on today's episode of Voice of Torah podcast. May we all merit to see the light of Mashiach speedily in our days.
Welcome, everyone, to our deep dive today. It's going to be a fascinating one. We're going to be looking at Parashat Tetzaveh. And we've got some really interesting excerpts here from Beit Israel International and the Adar Ephraim notes. I'm really excited to kind of dig into this and see what kind of hidden wisdom we can uncover.
Yeah, Tetzaveh is really fascinating because it gives us a very unique perspective on some of our traditions. One of the really interesting things about Parashat Tetzaveh is that Moshe's name is completely absent, and yet at the same time, his presence is felt throughout the Parsha.
It's really interesting how that works.
So you have this phrase, VeAtah Tetzaveh, which means, and you shall command, and it's directed at Moshe, even though he's not mentioned by name. And then the idea behind this is that his essence is so deeply embedded within the Torah itself that his name becomes almost unnecessary.
So like his teachings have become so ingrained that they're just part of the fabric of the text already.
Exactly. And this connects to a concept that both Beit Israel International and the Gadi Ephraim notes really emphasize, and that's the idea of the tzaddik, a righteous person who acts as a spiritual guide for the generation.
Okay.
And the Zohar, a key work of Jewish mysticism, interprets Moshe's hidden presence as a reflection of this idea.
So how does Moshe, who lived, thousands of years ago, connect to a tzaddik in our time?
Well, the Zohar explains that Moshe's spiritual influence shines through the Ner Tamid, the eternal light of the menorah, which represents that hidden spark of the tzaddik present in every generation.
Wow.
So just as Moshe connected the Jewish people to the divine light, so too does that tzaddik of each generation serve as a bridge between the spiritual and physical realms.
So it's like this continuous chain of spiritual leadership illuminating the path for each generation.
Exactly.
Makes you wonder how we can recognize the tzaddik of our time.
That is the question for the ages.
Yeah.
But perhaps part of the answer lies in understanding those qualities that were embodied by those who came before us, those who wore the mantle of spiritual leadership. And speaking of which, Parashat Tetzaveh also delves into the garments of the Kohen Gadol, the high priest,
Right.
which carry immense spiritual significance.
Yeah, and I'm particularly intrigued by how each garment represents a different aspect of the divine.
Yeah, the Gadi Ephraim notes actually go into great detail about this, explaining how the Kohen Gadol's garments correspond to the four worlds of creation.
Okay.
A Kabbalistic concept that describes the different levels of spiritual reality.
Okay.
For example, the Avnet, the sash worn by the Kohen Gadol represents the binding of the physical and spiritual realms.
So it's like the Kohen Gadol, through his garments, embodied that connection between heaven and earth.
Precisely. And then you have the zitz, the forehead plate inscribed with Kodesh LaHashem, meaning holy to God.
Right.
And this symbolizes that everything we do should have a higher purpose.
It's a constant reminder to act with intention and awareness.
Exactly.
But how does that translate to us today? We're not Kohanim. We don't wear these elaborate garments.
Well, that's where it gets really interesting. Beit Israel International suggests that each of us wears spiritual garments through our actions, our mitzvot, and our engagement with Torah.
Oh, so it's like our actions become a kind of spiritual clothing reflecting our inner state and connection to the divine.
Exactly. The way we treat others, the choices we make, the way we approach our work, all of these become threads in the tapestry of our spiritual garments.
I like that a lot.
And just as the Kohen Gadol's garments were designed to elevate him and connect him to a higher purpose, so too can our actions elevate us and bring holiness into our everyday lives.
This idea of spiritual garments really resonates with me. It makes me think about the intention behind my actions and how I can strive to embody those qualities that the Kohen Gadol's garments represented, qualities like connection, holiness, and purpose.
Yeah.
It's almost like a spiritual dress code for the soul.
I love that. It's a beautiful way to think about it. And just as the Kohen Gadol had to carefully prepare himself before entering the Holy Temple, we too should prepare ourselves inwardly before engaging in acts of service, prayer, or study.
So how do we go about this inner preparation? What are the tools or practices that can help us cultivate these spiritual garments? So it feels like we've been talking a lot about this idea of elevating ourselves and our actions. But I'm curious, how does Parashat Tetzaveh actually guide us towards that inner preparation? What specific tools or practices does it mention that can help us cultivate these spiritual garments?
Well, one of the most powerful tools that's mentioned in Tetzaveh is the keter and the incense offering. It's described in very intricate detail with specific ingredients that had to be carefully blended together.
Right.
And the sages teach that the fragrance of the keteret wasn't just a pleasant smell, it was actually symbolic of the prayers of the Jewish people ascending to heaven, sweetening divine judgment.
So the Kidduret wasn't just a physical offering. It represented something deeper, this power of prayer to connect us with the divine, and perhaps even influence the course of events.
Exactly. And this connects to the broader idea of tefillah, sincere prayer, which the Gadi Ephraim notes explain can have that same transformative power as the Keteret. It's about pouring our hearts out to Hashem, expressing our gratitude, our hopes, our fears, our aspirations.
I think for some people, though, focusing solely on sweetening divine judgment paints a very limited picture of prayer.
Okay.
So could the Keteret also represent our yearning for self-refinement and spiritual growth, regardless of external consequences?
That's an interesting point, and it definitely adds another layer of meaning to the Keteret.
Yeah.
Perhaps it's not just about influencing God's actions, but also about refining ourselves, purifying our intentions, and aligning our will with the divine will.
Okay.
It's about that inner transformation that occurs when we truly open ourselves to that connection with Hashem.
It's almost like the process of creating the Keteret with all its specific ingredients and careful preparation mirrors the process of refining our own character.
Right.
Carefully choosing our thoughts, our words, our actions.
I love that analogy. It's like we're each creating our own inner Keteret, blending together the qualities we want to embody: compassion, kindness, humility, generosity.
Yeah.
And offering them up as a fragrant offering to Hashem.
And just as the Keteret had the power to transform the atmosphere of the Holy Temple, our sincere prayers and refined actions can transform the atmosphere of our lives and the world around us.
Absolutely. Beit Yisrael International emphasizes that through heartfelt tefillah, we can actually elevate our surroundings. We can tap into that power. We can turn even the most ordinary moments into opportunities for spiritual connection.
Wow.
It's a reminder that holiness isn't confined to a specific place or time. It's something we can cultivate within ourselves and bring into every aspect of our lives.
So we've talked about Moshe's hidden presence, the Zadok in every generation, the symbolism of the Kohen Gadol's garments, the power of prayer, and this idea of creating our own inner Keteret. Is there a thread that connects all of these ideas?
I think one of the connecting threads is this concept of the Ner Tamid, the eternal flame that burned constantly in the Holy Temple.
Right.
It's mentioned in Parashat Tetzaveh as a symbol of the divine spark within each of us.
Okay, so how does the Ner Tamid, a physical flame, connect to this idea of a spiritual spark?
Well, the Mishnah teaches that just as the menorah's flame must never go out, so too must our devotion to Torah and mitzvah remain unwavering.
Beautiful.
So it's like the Ner Tamid is an external representation of an internal flame that burns within each of us.
Yep.
And the Gadi Ephraim notes described the Jewish soul as being like a flame, constantly reaching upwards towards unity with its source.
Wow.
Even in moments of darkness, Beit Israel International reminds us our connection to Hashem remains like an ember that can never be fully extinguished. It's a comforting thought, isn't it?
It is. To know that even when we feel lost, that spark within us continues to burn.
Yeah.
Makes me wonder, what can we do to keep that flame burning brightly? What are the things that nourish and sustain our connection to the divine?
Well, the Mishma's comparison of the Ner Tamid to our devotion to Torah and mitzvah gives us a clue.
Okay.
It suggests that engaging in acts of kindness, studying Torah, connecting with our tradition, are like adding fuel to the fire, keeping that inner flame burning strong.
It's like we're each responsible for tending to our own inner menorah.
Exactly.
Making sure that the flame of our connection to the divine never goes out.
Right.
And just as for Kohen Gadol had a specific role in tending to the physical menorah, we have a unique role to play in tending to the spiritual light within ourselves and within the world.
I love that imagery. It reminds me of another powerful theme that emerges in Parashat Tetzaveh, the Messianic era.
Ah, yes. The time when, according to tradition, the world will be transformed and filled with divine light.
Exactly. And the sages teach that Tetzaveh holds profound messianic significance, pointing towards a future where divine service is restored and the world is bathed in a new light.
Okay, I'm really intrigued by this connection between the Ner Tamid, our individual spiritual sparks, and the Messianic era. Could you elaborate on that a little bit? How does Tetzaveh point towards this future transformation?
Well, one of the key messianic symbols mentioned in Tetzaveh is the menorah itself.
Okay.
And according to tradition in the days of Mashiach, the light of the menorah will illuminate the entire world, signifying the return of Hashem's revealed presence.
So it's like the Ner Tamid, that individual flame within each of us, will be magnified and reflected on a global scale.
Right.
Illuminating the entire world with divine light.
That's a beautiful way to put it. And the Gadi Ephraim notes add another layer to this image. They explain that the garments of the Kohen Gadol, those symbols of spiritual authority and connection to the divine, will be worn once again in the rebuilt Beit HaMikdash.
So the very fabric of this future world will be imbued with holiness, reflecting the qualities embodied by the Kohen Gadol.
Exactly. It's an incredible vision.
It is.
And Beit Israel International teaches that by living a life of Torah and mitzvah, we're actively preparing for this redemption, making the world ready to receive Hashem's eternal light.
Wow.
It's not just about passively waiting for the Messianic era to arrive.
Right.
It's about actively cultivating those qualities within ourselves and within our communities that will make such a world possible.
It's like we're each holding a piece of the puzzle.
Mm.
And by living lives aligned with Torah and mitzvah, we're helping to create the conditions for that final picture of redemption to emerge.
That's a powerful way to think about it, and it emphasizes that we're not just individuals on a personal spiritual journey.
Right.
We're part of a collective effort to bring more light, more holiness, more kindness into the world.
So it's like our individual spiritual garments are contributing to a collective garment that will eventually clothe the entire world in holiness.
Exactly. It's a beautiful and inspiring thought.
It is.
And it brings us back to that question we started with. How do we prepare ourselves for this elevated future?
Yeah.
How do we cultivate those qualities within ourselves that will contribute to this collective transformation?
It feels like Parashat Tetzaveh has given us a blueprint for this inner work, with its teachings about the power of prayer, the symbolism of the Kohen Gadol's garments, and this eternal flame that burns within each of us. But I'm curious, how do we translate these ancient teachings into practical actions in our modern lives?
Yeah.
How do we actually live out these ideas in a way that's meaningful and relevant today? It feels like we've uncovered so many layers of meaning in Parashat Tetzaveh, from Moshe's hidden presence to the Kohen Gadol's garments, the power of prayer and this vision of a messianic future. But how do we bridge that gap between these ancient teachings and our modern lives? How do we actually embody these ideas in a way that's relevant today?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And I think Parashat Tetzaveh actually offers us some clues. Remember the ditz? The forehead plate worn by the Kohen Gadol inscribed with Kodesh LaHashem.
Yes, meaning holy to God, right? We talked about it earlier as this reminder that everything we do should have a higher purpose.
Exactly. And while we may not wear physical garments with these holy inscriptions, we can cultivate that same awareness in our daily lives. It's about asking ourselves, what are my intentions behind my action? Am I acting with kindness, compassion, integrity? Am I striving to make a positive impact on the world?
So it's almost like having a mental checklist before we speak or act.
Right.
Is this aligned with my highest values? Is this bringing more light into the world?
I love that. It's like a spiritual filter for our thoughts and actions. And just as the Kohen Gadol had to carefully prepare himself before entering the Holy Temple, we too can create rituals and practices that help us prepare inwardly before engaging in our daily activities.
Can you give some examples of what those rituals or practices might look like in a modern context?
Sure, it could be as simple as taking a few moments of silence before starting your workday, setting an intention to bring mindfulness and presence to your interactions. Or maybe it's reciting a prayer or reading a passage from Torah before making an important decision.
I find that even just taking a few deep breaths before responding to a challenging email can make a huge difference in how I show up.
Exactly. It's about creating those pauses, those moments of reflection that allow us to connect with that inner spark, that divine presence within us, and bring that awareness into our everyday lives.
So it's like we're consciously choosing to wear those spiritual garments throughout our day, reminding ourselves that even the most mundane tasks can be imbued with holiness and purpose.
Precisely. And this reminds me of another important element from Parashat Tetzaveh, the power of prayer.
Yeah?
Just as the Keteret symbolized the prayers of the Jewish people ascending to heaven, our own prayers can serve as a bridge between the mundane and the divine.
You know, it's interesting that you bring up prayer, because I think there's often a misconception that prayer is about asking God for things.
Right.
But in the context of what we've been discussing, it seems like prayer can be so much more than that.
Absolutely. Prayer, when offered with sincerity, can be a powerful tool for transformation, both internal and external. It's about opening our hearts to Hashem, expressing our gratitude, our hopes, our fears, your aspirations.
Imagine trying to explain the symbolism of the Kohen Gadol's garments to someone who's never seen them talk about a fashion challenge.
Yeah, phrase from the Torah.
Okay.
VeAtah Tetzaveh, and we're going to explore its hidden depths. And the sources we're going to be using are going to be excerpts from Beit Yisrael International and the Gadi Ephraim notes.
Awesome.
Now, you might be thinking, VeAtah Tetzaveh, that's just a fancy way of saying you shall command.
Right.
Well, hold on to your hats, because it's about to get much more interesting. These sources unveil how this seemingly simple phrase opens up a window into spiritual leadership and our connection to the divine, and it even gives us a glimpse into the future redemption.
You know what's so fascinating about these sources is that they don't just offer interpretations. They actually connect it to our lives. They delve into how understanding this phrase can change how we see leadership and our potential and our role in the world.
Okay, so let's dive right in. The Gadi Ephraim notes immediately point out the significance of that very first word, VeAtah, and they highlight the difference between simply saying Tetzaveh and you shall command, and using the phrase VeAtah Tetzaveh. What's the big deal with that extra word?
So think of it this way. Tetzaveh is like giving instructions,
Okay.
while VeAtah Tetzaveh is like revealing a deeper truth. The Gadi Ephraim notes explain that VeAtah points to Moshe Rabbeinu being more than just a man with a name. He's a vessel, he's a conduit for divine energy. It's not just Moshe giving orders, but something much greater flowing through him.
So it's like the difference between reading a recipe and having a master chef guide you through it.
Exactly.
You get the same instructions, but the experience and the outcome are completely different.
Exactly. And the Zohar takes us a step further, suggesting that VeAtah actually refers to the Shekinah itself, the divine presence.
Wow.
It's as if the divine will is being channeled through Moshe.
So VeAtah Tetzaveh isn't just a command, it's a direct transmission from a higher source.
Exactly.
But what about that little vav at the beginning of VeAtah? It seems like such a small detail.
Don't let its size fool you. The Gadi Ephraim notes emphasize that the Vav acts as a bridge between the upper and lower worlds, connecting the divine and the physical. Imagine it like a fiber optic cable carrying information, constantly transmitting divine influence into our world.
Okay, so that's how we receive that spark from above.
Right.
But the Arizal, a great Kabbalist, takes this Vav concept even further. He teaches that the Vav symbolizes the bond between the Shekinah and Israel, with the Zadok, the righteous person, acting as the link. So the Zadok is like a human valve.
That's a great way to put it. Think about figures like Rabbi Akiva or the Baal Shem Tov. They weren't just learned individuals. They embodied this Vav concept. Their lives weren't about personal gain, but about channeling divine energy to elevate others and repair the world.
So it's like they were living antennas bringing that divine signal down to earth for everyone to benefit from.
Precisely. And this idea that Zadok as a Vav connects beautifully with the mission of Beit Yisrael International, which focuses on making these deeper dimensions of Torah relevant to our daily lives. They want us to see ourselves as potential vavs, too.
That's really empowering. Okay, we've unpacked VeAtah, but what about Atah itself? What's the significance of that word?
Atah is like a hidden treasure chest filled with meaning. It's composed of the letters Aleph and Tav, representing the beginning and the end of creation, with the High in the middle symbolizing the Shekinah. It's like a blueprint showing us that the divine presence is woven into the fabric of everything around us.
So it's not that the divine is separate from the world, but rather that it's present within every aspect of existence.
Exactly. And the sages teach that Atah represents the full revelation of divine light in this world. But how do we experience that? The Gadi Ephraim notes offer an intriguing perspective. They explain that when a tzaddik speaks, it's actually the Shekinah speaking through them.
Wait, so when we hear the teachings of someone like the Rambam or Rabbi Nachman, we're actually tapping into a higher source of wisdom? That's mind-blowing.
That's the power of Atah. It's about recognizing the divine spark, not just in great figures from the past, but in those who embody that same spirit of connection and revelation today.
Okay, so VeAtah sets the stage, Moshe as a conduit channeling divine will. Then Atah reveals the divine light shining through him, making that connection tangible.
Exactly. And this understanding of VeAtah leads us to another crucial point, one that both our sources emphasize the nature of true leadership.
All right, let's talk leadership. The Gadi Ephraim notes are very clear that Moshe wasn't just issuing commands, he was infusing the people with divine energy. But what does that mean for us thousands of years later?
The Zohar provides an answer. It teaches that Moshe's soul continues to illuminate Israel through the Tzaddikim in every generation. This means true leadership isn't just about giving orders, but about transmitting a spark of that divine light, inspiring others to connect with their own inner Atah.
So it's not just about Moshe in that moment, but about an ongoing transmission of spiritual light through those who embody his qualities.
Exactly. And when we look at how Beit Yisrael International approaches leadership, we see that same emphasis on inspiring and uplifting others. They see the study and application of Torah as a way to connect with that inner light and share it with the world.
So true leadership, the kind that both VeAtah Tetzaveh and Beit Yisrael International point towards, is about empowering others to access their own divine potential. But how does this connect to the idea of the future redemption?
That's where things get really fascinating. The Gadi Ephraim notes point out that VeAtah Tetzaveh doesn't just describe a historical event, it hints at the future redemption. They explain that in the Messianic era, the light of VeAtah will be fully revealed, illuminating the world in a way we can hardly imagine.
So it's like this phrase contains a seed of potential waiting to blossom in the future. But what does that actually mean for us? What would it look like to experience that full revelation of VeAtah?
Imagine a world where leadership isn't about power or control, but about guiding others towards their own inner light, where our actions aren't driven by ego, but by a desire to connect with something greater than ourselves. That's the vision VeAtah Tetzaveh offers.
That sounds amazing, but is that just a utopian dream, or can we actually play a part in bringing that vision to life?
The Zohar teaches that Moshe's presence continues in each generation, preparing the world for that final redemption. It's as if he's still working behind the scenes, inspiring us to become those vows, those bridges between heaven and earth.
Wow. So it's not just about waiting for some future event. It's about embodying those qualities of VeAtah Tetzaveh now in our own lives. But how do we even begin to do that?
Remember how Akka represents the full revelation of divine light. The Gadi Ephraim notes remind us that we each have a role in bringing that light into the world. It's not about being a biblical figure or a great scholar. It's about recognizing that spark within ourselves and fanning it into a flame through our actions.
So it's like we're all potential vabs walking around, but we need to activate that connection to become true conduits for that divine light.
Exactly. And the way we activate that connection is through Torah and mitzvah, good deeds. Think about the mitzvah of visiting the sick. It's not just about offering comfort. It's about bringing a spark of light into a dark place. Or the mitzvah of giving charity. It's not just about providing material support. It's about sharing that abundance of divine energy with others.
So every mitzvah, every act of kindness becomes a way to build that bridge between heaven and earth to bring more light into the world.
Precisely. And that's where the teachings of Beit Yisrael International become so relevant. They emphasize that studying Torah isn't just about intellectual knowledge. It's about absorbing that divine light and letting it guide our actions.
So VeAtah Tetzaveh becomes this incredible blueprint for living a meaningful life, a life where every action is infused with purpose and connection to something greater.
Exactly. And Rabbi Chaim Vital, a great Kabbalist, even taught that Mashiach will carry the same divine spark as Moshe. So by embodying these principles of VeAtah Tetzaveh, we're not just fulfilling our own potential, we're contributing to that ultimate messianic vision.
Wow, that puts things in a whole new perspective. Every act of kindness, every time we open a book of Torah, every time we go out of our way to help someone, it's all part of a much larger story.
And the more we live with that awareness, the more we become like those valves, connecting heaven and earth, bringing the world closer to that ultimate revelation of VeAtah.
You know, there's a verse in Tehillim that suddenly feels so much more powerful in light of this. With Hashem is the source of life, and in his light we see light. It's like VeAtah Tetzaveh is giving us the tools to see that light and become a source of light for others.
It's like we're all on a journey to uncover that inner Adar, to let that divine light shine through us. And the more we align ourselves with the principles of VeAtah Tetzaveh, the brighter that light becomes.
This has been an incredible deep dive. We started with what seemed like a simple phrase, and it's blossomed into this profound teaching about leadership potential and our role in the world.
And it's not just about understanding these concepts, it's about taking them to heart and letting them transform our lives.
Exactly. So for our listeners who are feeling inspired to bring a little more VeAtah Tetzaveh into their own lives, what's action they can take today to connect with that inner valve and let their Ada shine?
You know, that's a great question. It's easy to get caught up in the big picture of VeAtah Tetzaveh, the future redemption, the ultimate revelation of light.
Yeah.
But the real magic happens in those small moments of our daily lives.
So true. Sometimes those big concepts can feel overwhelming. It's like, okay, I want to be a Vav, but where do I even begin?
Right. So instead of trying to conquer the world all at once, think about your sphere of influence, your family, your friends, your community. What's one small act of kindness that you can do today to bring a little bit of light into their lives?
You mean like helping a neighbor carry groceries, or sending a kind text to someone who's struggling, or even just making an effort to really listen to someone who needs to be heard?
Exactly. Those might seem like insignificant actions, but remember, every time we choose to act with kindness and compassion,
Okay.
we're strengthening that connection between heaven and earth,
Yeah.
revealing a little bit more of that Atah within us.
So VeAtah Tetzaveh isn't just some abstract concept. It's a call to action.
Right.
An invitation to bring more light into the world one small act at a time.
And the beauty of it is that those small acts have a ripple effect.
Right.
When we choose to be a source of light,
Yeah.
we inspire others to do the same.
It's like that quote from the Baal Shem Tov, every good deed you do, every mitzvah you perform creates an angel.
Right.
So we're not just illuminating our own lives, we're creating a whole army of light bringers.
Exactly. And as we learned from Beit Israel International, those acts of kindness don't have to be grand gestures. They can be as simple as offering a genuine compliment, sharing a smile, or lending a helping hand.
So it's not about waiting for some grand opportunity to change the world. It's about embracing those everyday moments as opportunities to reveal our own inner Atah.
And you know what's amazing? The more we make those choices, the more we start to see the world through that lens of VeAtah Tetzaveh. We begin to recognize those sparks of light in others, and we feel that divine connection flowing through our lives.
So VeAtah Tetzaveh isn't just a phrase from the Torah. It becomes a way of life, a way of seeing the world and our place in it.
Exactly. And that's what makes this teaching so profound and so relevant to our lives today. It reminds us that we each have the power to bring more light into the world, to connect with our own inner Vav, and reveal that Atah within us.
Well, this deep dive has certainly left me feeling inspired and empowered. A huge thank you to our expert for sharing their insights and guiding us through this fascinating exploration of VeAtah Tetzaveh.
It's been my pleasure.
And to all our listeners, we hope this deep dive has sparked something within you. Remember, you don't need to wait for a grand stage to make a difference. Embrace those small moments of kindness, connect with your own inner Atah, and let your light shine bright.
Keep diving deep.
Until next time.